Great, thanks. Mike Seidenberg, lead portfolio manager of the Allianz Technology Trust. I have worked on the product since 2009 and the lead manager since 2022. You know, the trust is really designed to identify and focus on technology companies that are changing how corporations spend money. And one of the things that we really, a core tenet that we have is this notion of a winner's game versus a loser's game. When I say that, you know, I worked at Oracle after attending Columbia Business School, and the cybersecurity budget was embedded in software. Today, at any CIO budgetary meeting you go to, cybersecurity has its own line item budget. So we want to identify and figure out the companies that are part of this, you know, new budgetary cycles. And therefore, the pie, it's not a zero-sum game. The pie actually grows. And if you just think about your own interaction with technology, today we're living in a world where technology creates competitive advantage. If you don't meet your customer digitally, whether you're a business to business or consumer to business, you're going to get left behind. So our process is really designed to identify and to go invest in the companies that we think are creating competitive advantage for their customers. We have a long proven track record. It's a very consistent yet evolving investment process. I like to say it's a mosaic where we look at a variety of inputs. It's not just talking to management, it's going out and talking to users of technology, going to user groups, talking to chief information officers, talking to system integrators, so that we can have this mosaic and think about, like, you know, where exactly should we be spending our time in investing. And lastly, on this slide, it's proximity to the Silicon Valley. And it isn't that you can't do it elsewhere, it's just that being domiciled there, you know, it's funny, you talked about Broadcom in the previous presentation. I just spent an hour with Hock Tan and our board less than 2 weeks ago. It was one of the highlights of my career. You know, going and actually sitting down and meeting the people that run these businesses really kind of gives you a feel for and some sense of what you're investing in. And, you know, the proximity is something that we really try to take advantage of and really helps us figure things out. And here again, it's not that you can't do it elsewhere. We just think that being in the heart of it does give us an advantage. Now let's see if I can get this right. Great. This shows you the various returns of technology sectors this year. So, you know, I like to say that not all sectors in technology are weighted equally or valued equally. You know, if we had nothing but exposure to IT services, you know, the trust would be really, really far behind its benchmark. So in a given year, our job is to figure out the sectors that are really going to go and outperform and create value. And, you know, this just really speaks to the fact that, you know, there are relevant areas of spend in technology, and there are areas that kind of fall off relevancy. If I thought about, you know, just take a look at hardware, which is something we've probably been underweight the past 15 years because we just didn't understand the valuations, and we saw software starting to really take dominance in IT spend. So we've been able to be underweight certain sectors, but this just is a good representation of, you know, just the dispersion of returns. I mean, that's pretty shocking if you look at it, because it's all the same sector, but these are subsectors within technology. And that I don't think this year is any less representative than most years in technology. There's just a lot of dispersion. You know, if you just kind of think about, you know, our kind of what you've heard the past couple of years, you know, if I went around the room, you know, 3 years ago and asked anybody about artificial intelligence, maybe a few hands would go up and know a little about what was going on there. But you can see today that is such a top of mind sector for you know, for companies, and such an area of focus. So here again, you know, if you look at these there's a lot of rate of change here, and capturing that rate of change is really important to create performance. And we really kind of are focused on trying to figure out where those dollars are being reallocated, or pounds or yen, or wherever it is, where that company's product is basically, is it in line of sight for spin, or is it off the mark? And if it's off the mark, you probably don't want to own a whole lot of that business. I think, I'll pause here for just a minute, and I'll tell you, I think the best neighborhood in technology long-term is cybersecurity. It is a necessary spin, and 10 years from now, when somebody else might be speaking to you, if I'm not here, they'll be talking about cybersecurity. There's no doubt about it. We're living in a very connected world. Our adversaries are increasingly sophisticated. It's no longer 5 people in a room trying to hack into a main street or high street retailer. It's nation states with multi-billion-dollar budgets trying to steal state secrets. Yet all of us in this room are more and more digital, right? If you think about just your experience, whether it's getting up in the morning with a smartphone that's probably replaced your alarm. So we're living in an increasingly connected and digital world, and cybersecurity is really a necessary area of spend. By the way, my guess is 3 years from now, there'll be something else on this particular chart. So artificial intelligence, here again, I've been doing this for a really long time. I've seen a lot of fads in technology. The interest and the spend against artificial intelligence really suggests that it is a secular theme. It's something we'll be talking about for a long while. And I just think these factoids, and this was done by KPMG, so it's not a fly-by-night survey. It's a totally legitimate survey. If you just think about 64% of respondents thought that AI would help their business gain competitive advantage. 73% believe that it's going to increase worker productivity. I would tell you on that, I think near term that's the case. I think longer term there is a concern. When I think longer term, I think 10 years out, there is a case about what it does to the overall employment kind of globally. I do think that that there is some risk to overall employment with the advent of, or with the implementation of artificial intelligence. But here again, that's a ways away. Here I came out of software, and this just kind of shows you the path and kind of where we've come and where we're going. And you can see that, we don't really have, human intelligence compute yet, but we're going to get there. And we probably will get there faster than 2040. I can remember, the early portions of digitalization when I was working in industry. I've always been a huge fan of just using data to make decisions, and really thought that, over time, big data sets could really, just mathematically thinking, the larger your sample set is, the better the outcome, just statistically speaking. So as we move towards machine learning and AI, the notion of using data more and more to kind of automate things and to make decisions really makes a lot of sense for me. But we're still relatively early days, and we're not at a point where computers are as smart as the human brain. But we probably get there at some point. With the interest in artificial intelligence becomes just a massive amount of spend. And if you took a look at the trust, we also own TSMC, which I thought was interesting. It's one of our bigger positions as well. It's a Taiwanese leading edge semiconductor company. Sorry to use an acronym, which is just a fabulous business. It's very difficult to do elsewhere, even though other countries are trying to build leading edge semiconductors. But just you have this upward trajectory of CapEx that's driving, the equipment providers, the assembly providers. We own a company, Monolithic Power, which makes power semiconductors that sit on a system to basically manage the power as chips get more and more complex. So there's just a lot of opportunity when you see this type of interest and spend in a theme in technology. We went through this post the pandemic, that you can tell by this slide, looking post the pandemic, we saw IT budgets start to really kind of bottom and trough out. And that was a fairly painful time period for technology investing. But now we're starting to see an upward trajectory to IT spend. And I think this is a good leading indicator that shows us that the new normal, and I don't expect it to return. I don't expect any type of return that we saw in Q1 of 21 and 22. But I do think that as budgets recover, technology overall should do better. And one would expect technology stocks to do better depending on your positioning and where you are within that budgetary cycle. You don't have to know a whole lot about semiconductors to understand they're an increasing portion of content here again in our daily lives. If you've gone into a new automobile and you think about all the safety features, if you've gone into a construction site and seen the amount of tools now that are being battery powered, they're just an increasing part of our life. And that cycle, it was painful, kind of here again, painful post the pandemic as supply chains kind of reevaluated, but now we're still relatively early in that cycle, or we're still relatively mid-cycle within the semiconductor spend, and we think that's an interesting opportunity across the trust. Cybersecurity, it's rare that I look at a segment that's this large, that's going to grow kind of almost 12% to 2030. It really boils down to the fact that the adversaries are constantly changing vectors. So there isn't a consistent area of attack. As they change vectors of attack, that requires spend by corporations, and that spend manifests itself in companies buying lots of products. I need to pick up the pace a little. The cloud, I'm not going to, I won't bore you here, but the cloud, if you listen to Andy Jassy or Microsoft on the last 2 conference calls, they talked about most workloads are still on premise. Those need to move to the cloud. This really speaks to that. Just a variety of themes in the trust, whether it's machine learning, whether it's mobility, these are just things that kind of overarch across the entire trust. So, just some things that kind of drive interest for us. The trust is approximately 1.5 billion pounds. It's a very team-based approach. I describe myself as a portfolio manager as I'm so not a dictator. I really work collaboratively with my team, if I can say that correctly. And I really enjoy working with the various analysts, which we'll see on the next slide, to make sure that we can find those emerging opportunities in primarily the mid-cap, large-cap companies. So this is the team, lots of experience. I'm definitely looking younger in that position, that photo than I do now. Thank you, Allianz. But lots of experience, and we spend a lot of time with one another. We are supported by a variety of resources. So if you leave this presentation with nothing else, just understand that this is a multi-pronged investment process. We really think about risk. We think about risk not only from a subsector perspective within technology, but from a style perspective. And we want to diversify in that, we would never want to have too much exposure to a given style or a given subsector. But it's very much a bottoms-up oriented with a macro overview driven strategy purely focused on technology. So thanks for your time. Appreciate you guys coming out tonight.